I want to make sure that it starts on the tube, I think. Wait for it. Wait for it.
Mine already says live.
Oh, mine still says starting soon. I mean, it says live on Google, but I was waiting for it to show up on.
Oh, on
Yes.
you're looking on YouTube itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's usually a delay.
Stupid idiot delay. Cool. All right. I'll close that now. I'll start the recording. And I don't have a funny thing to say about you this time because it's going to be really hard to come up with new ones all the time. So I've given up already. All right. Recording. Hello and welcome to the Podcast of Terror, a production of Galactic Netcasts. This is a show where we cover movies, horror things, scary things, pretty much whatever Corey and I or whomever is willing to hang out with me for some time decide we're going to talk about for half an hour and force you to listen to. As mentioned, I got Corey Scott with me today. He's one hell of a guy. How are you doing, Corey?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Pretty good. I feel like we need to mention something today, the day that we're recording this. Wes Craven passed away, which is huge.
Yeah, it's pretty monstrous. It was yesterday on Sunday that I first found out about it, and he was 76. He had been suffering apparently from brain cancer for a while, and nobody knew.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like when you find out, like Tim Curry had like a stroke and stuff, and is in a wheelchair, like that just blows my mind because these people, you never really think about them actually getting older.
Yeah, no, and Craven's one of those guys who's, I mean, his first movie was 72, I think, for The Last House on the Left. And
yeah, 72.
so, I mean, he's been around for a long time. 76 is one of those ages where it doesn't seem old enough to lose somebody, but it also doesn't seem young enough that it should be like hugely freakish. It's terrible because it's Wes Craven and because I've always loved his stuff.
Yeah,
our first show, I wore that Nightmare on Elm Street shirt.
Yeah, I love the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I remember seeing them and all the other stuff that he did. But like you said, it's just kind of weird. 76 isn't that old, but it's really not that young either. So you kind of, I don't know.
And he still, when he does films, when he writes characters, when he writes young people, the way he writes young people sounds authentic. It doesn't sound like some weird guy who doesn't understand what kids are talking about. I mean, to me, I'm not young anymore either. So maybe to you, it doesn't sound as authentic.
I don't know. We could go all day about how young kids are written these days in movies and all that, but whatever. I just felt that it needed to be mentioned because, for a horror purist, I guess it's kind of a huge hit, even though I don't know. It was weird. I mean, it is what it is. People are gonna pass away. Life goes on. But I just don't think we'll get another Wes Craven. I mean, now you have M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong, who's pumping out hot, steamy turds left and right. He hasn't done anything good in a while, and I think
and doesn't necessarily really do horror. He does sort of.
He does mind fuckers.
That's right, or as best he can. And who are the horror directors of these days? I mean, Rob Zombie was the last guy who was doing it that seemed really driven towards it, and he didn't have a lot of output, but at least he gave a shit. And
yeah, but he kind of gave a shit in the wrong way. I mean, like House of a Thousand Corpses and The Devil's Rejects. I love both of those movies. Just head over heels in love with those movies. But then he did Halloween, which was like a weird take on it and kind of lost some people. And then he did Halloween 2, which really lost a lot of people.
Yeah, way out there.
And so I'm curious to see what he does with, was it 31 or 13 or whatever the hell. Yeah, I don't know. It could go either way. But someone else is Eli Roth.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say Eli Roth next.
But what has he done? He's done Hostel, Hostel 2, Hostel 3.
Didn't he do the... what was the ones with the people getting sick out in the woods? Was it Cabin in the Woods? Or no, Cabin in the Woods was Whedon. It was something like that. Cabin Fever.
Cabin Fever, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Cabin in the Woods was the weird TV show. Cabin Fever had Sean Hunter in it.
Yeah,
Which, if you've watched Boy Meets World, you'll catch that one.
that's pretty much all he's always what he's
Oh
going to
yeah,
be.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's all he's ever done. It's the only thing good he's ever done with his life.
Uh, but yeah, and Eli Roth, what he shows up in Tarantino stuff every once in a while. He's just, I don't know. The torture porn stuff doesn't really do it for me.
Everything
But
gets overplayed. I mean, you have your Paranormal Activity that launched the found footage barrage of shitty movies, and then you got the torture porn barrage of shitty movies. So they'll have to find the next big genre.
yeah.
But anyways, we digress. That was our homage to Wes Craven. You'll be missed, buddy. Before we get into the movie of this week, you can find our shows by going to gncasts.com. That's GNCASTS.com. You can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher. If you listen to this and you like it, a 5-star rating would be awesome. We're still pretty new, so all the reviews we can get would be cool. Tell all your friends, your family. Your grandma probably wants to listen to us talk about torture porn, so you're going to want to send that her way. You can leave us feedback by emailing galacticnetcasts@gmail.com or leave a voicemail message. Also by going to gncasts.com. We also have the Galactic Collective. If you want to make fun of us, listen to all the other shows that we do here on Galactic Netcasts. You can also find that at the website, gncasts.com. Down to business. This time around this week, I'm getting really bad at putting these up in a timely fashion, so I apologize to people that actually want to hear more. Probably Corey, who wants to record more. As you can see behind me, the room I'm sitting in is full of shit if you're watching, because my wife and I are moving, and this is kind of the catch-all room for now. Anyways, we watched The Town That Dreaded Sundown. IMDb gave it a 5.6 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 69%. The 14-year-old boy in me loves that.
This might have been written for the 14-year-old boy in you, actually.
I'm fairly certain. For those not familiar, this is the not really a remake, not really a reboot, not really a sequel to the original, which came out in the 80s, 70s?
76, and we'll talk about that. But it is based off of a true story that happened in the 40s,
right? Which is it kind of gets really weird and confusing to watch. But you went back and you watched the original, correct?
Yeah, you assigned me this movie, and I watched it.
I asked for your opinion. Don't waiting. I say watch this.
No, it was cool. I didn't know it, and so I was kind of excited to see it. And then I got curious about it, and I went back and I watched the original right after, which was. This one was available through Netflix streaming. The original I had to rent through Amazon streaming, which was not a big deal. And then I started reading up on the original story that it was based off of. So essentially what happens, this one gets a little meta because the original thing actually happened in this town in Texarkana in the 40s. And then a film was made in the late 70s. In the beginning of this movie, there are people in the Texarkana town who watch the movie every year, which I guess is a true thing. This was actually happening. It's part of what inspired them to make this remake. So they're watching the original film, and then stuff starts happening. Shit happens in the movie that emulates the film and is supposed to be a callback to the original murders. So the murders that happen in this film, and there are many, don't necessarily emulate what originally truly happened. They emulate the movie from 1976. So there are things that are strictly like we're copying that movie. And as they're playing the movie in this, I don't believe it was the actual footage from the original movie. I think they just kind of reproduced stuff as they went along.
Which I never watched the original. I had heard about this through some friends, and that's kind of where I got the idea to do it. But it wasn't what I expected. And before we really get into this, for those not familiar, the description would be 65 years after a masked serial killer terrorized the small town of Texarkana, which, if you're not familiar, is on the border of Texas and Arkansas. It like spans both states or something crazy. The Moonlight Murders began again. They were trying to figure out if it's a copycat or something more. Their lonely high school girl with dark secrets of her own, maybe the key to catching him. Which that line, like how that girl gets used in the movie, makes it kind of even weirder. Where it's like it's not just a straight slasher movie; it's like a slasher movie with this bad plot twist where the killer's trying to like utilize this girl to be like her puppet in his murder games.
Yeah, and it's not really clear as to why she was chosen. In fact, the the person who's doing it, it's not really clear why they were chosen either. There's a
No.
couple of things that's really confusing. Like there's, um, I guess if we're just going to spoil it, one thing that I see a lot of people say in reference to this movie online is that it's very similar to Scream, and that's kind of an automatic giveaway in the fact that there's not just one killer. And
Yeah, which you don't find out till like the very end, and then you don't there's like you said, they never answer why the killer is the killer, why either killer is the killer, why the chick was chosen by the killer. It's just ass backwards and just
well, one of them is like the great grandson or the grandson of the original murderer, from the true story. That guy is actually the killer's grandson, and they explain it when they go to the director's son's place in the in like the little shack that he's living in. He talks about why he thinks it's this other person and who that person is. He talks about the guy's mother and how she passed it down. Her husband was supposed to be the one who was going to get revenge for the guy, and he doesn't do it, and she calls him a pussy and has her son do it instead. And so that is supposed to be what happens, is that it goes through. It's supposed to be this generational thing, like he's getting revenge for, you know, his grandfather killing people. I don't really understand that at all.
it's just I don't know. It's just a weird concept. Like if you're gonna make some sort of a movie as a spin-off to an actual event, like in my opinion, stick as closely to as possible as to the actual story. Don't deviate and make shit up. And yes, it's 65 years later, but make it someone who's like super obsessed with the murders to begin with and spent all his time, trying to figure out who did it and lost his mind and then went after someone and the girl is the likeness of the original, something like that. Don't just be like, well, the grandma called him a pussy and now he's killing people.
Right.
And
yeah. And the person who teams up with him seems to be, there's no connection between that anybody can find. And I think they even say that over the credits. They go through and they say they could never find a connection between these two people and why they teamed up and tried to kill her and why they tried to murder everybody else.
Right. So then when he's the first one to die, or so you think he's the first one to die, go back or give some sort of story as to how they talked about, how they talked in the first place. Then just at the end, there's two guys and they pull their masks off and it's this guy you thought was dead and this other guy who's like loosely related to the original killer. I don't know. I wanted so badly to like this movie. And it got like my wife watched it too. And like 3/4 of the way through, she's like, "Oh, I really picked a shitty movie to watch. I'm sorry." And I'm like, "Yeah, you did." And she's usually pretty good about bad horror movies, so that says something.
My wife never apologizes for the movie she's watching being shitty. She just puts them on and then she says, "Oh, this is really shitty," and leaves it on there.
She just laughs at you and says, "You will watch this."
Yeah, pretty much. I just walk out. But this at least had a lot of good people in it. That was kind of the big thing. Gary Cole is in this.
Gary Cole?
No, Gary Cole.
I know. I was.
He is. I mean, he's Gary Cole. He's never going to be bad. Anthony Anderson is in this. He was excellent in this. There's quite a few people that I recognized. Veronica Cartwright was the grandmother. So, yeah, I kept expecting her to spit up cherry pits because of Witches of Eastwick.
So I don't mean to cut you off, but I didn't realize Gary Cole is who he was. I just know him from Office Space and as Reese Bobby.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
when he first was on screen or whatever, I told my wife, I'm like, "Hey, check out who it is," and she's like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." He's like talking to the lady in the wheelchair or the hospital bed, I believe it is, hospital bed. And so you think he's gonna put a kilo of Colombian Bam Bam under her bed? And we had a good laugh, and that was it.
He actually had one of the cooler death scenes in this too, which is just out of nowhere, kind of surprising in the midst. it was kind of like, oh wow, they offed Gary Cole. It's kind of like with the movie where they killed Steven Seagal at the very beginning of the film. It's like, oh, Steven Seagal in an action movie. Oh, but he's dead.
See, that's a bad movie if Seagal doesn't kill everybody.
Nope. It was not good, but it was of its time. So this was, I mean, not for the fault of being a bad movie. It was okay, but it was kind of confusing because it was following two different things. It was following the original movie and it was following the original true story. But the way that it was telling its story, it felt like it was taking that movie as the reality instead. And that didn't make a lot of sense. The murder scenes, though, completely match up with the first movie. So there's one scene in this where these two guys who are playing in the band in the town, when they think that they've caught the killer or they've killed the killer, these two guys in this band at this party go drive off together, and they go to this little kind of park, and they're trying to figure out how to work being gay together, which was almost kind of cute and sweet in its own way. But then they're in a park in the middle of the night about to have some sort of intercourse. That means they're going to die. And it's a pretty weird scene because as the murderer is killing one of them, he then takes a trombone.
Which, this was by far my favorite death in almost every horror movie I've ever seen in history.
Yeah. So he takes a trombone and he attaches a knife to it, and he starts blowing into the trombone and then stretching it out and stabbing the guy as he's trying to play the trombone, and not playing the trombone at all. It's not like he's a classically trained musician and he knows what he's doing. He is trying to do it through a mask as well.
Yeah.
And it's just weird. It's really weird. But then I watched the original afterwards, and that scene, although it was not a gay couple, there was the same essential scene in the original movie, and it's the most gruesome scene in that movie, I think, where this woman is tied to a tree after he's just killed her boyfriend. He takes the knife, puts it on the trombone, and starts blowing and stabbing her with it as well. And she's just begging for her life, and it's these small stabs that it's obviously taking a while to kill her. It was a hard scene to watch, but it also, I was just like, but what made them think to do that? Because in the original history, there was no trombone. One of the people murdered was a saxophonist, and I think they found the saxophone somewhere around her, but it had nothing to do with being a murder weapon at all. So it was kind of a weird thing to reproduce for this, other than the fact that it was an iconic part of their original movie. They must have decided that they wanted to put it in this one.
Which it does show the original, so there's, like you said, there's kind of that throwback to the original, but still, like, I feel like if you're gonna if they wanted this to be a sequel or a reboot, I wouldn't even call it a reboot. If they wanted this to be a sequel of the original, it should have been, the town that still dreaded sundown. Instead of having like all these callbacks to the original movie, it should be able to stand on its own, and it didn't, because they did stuff like that.
Yeah, and I would have appreciated if they had just said something like, okay, well, because there were two killers and one of them is more the fanboy than, like, he's not the one who's originally related to the first killer, then the fanboy emulating the movie murders would make sense.
Yes.
And then the other guy is just kind of doing things as he sees fit to kill the people he wants to kill. If they had done something to explain that aspect of it, then that would have made a little bit more sense too. But they don't really go into it. I don't know what the point was of trying to follow the exact killing patterns to such a degree in this, up until the very end when they start chasing the girl down. That's when things kind of go off the reservation a little bit.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I was kind of disappointed. I know I've said it a dozen times already, but it didn't like grasp me the way I wanted it to, and it just kind of lost my interest. But it had cool parts, definitely. The trombone scene is hilarious. Like, I think kitschy kills like that in movies are pure gold.
Yeah,
got to be something. There's no compelling story here.
Which I feel bad about, because the writer of the film, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, is a comic book writer. He is he's working on Archie. He's doing the Afterlife with Archie comic that's very popular right now, where Archie is basically in a horror story, and some of his friends are undead. He wrote for Marvel. He did a very good Nightcrawler series with Derek Robertson several years ago. He's a great writer. He does good horror stuff. So when I found out that he was the writer of this, I was like, okay, well, it's a screenplay and things happen with the directors, and who knows how much of it was changed. I think that there was some substance to the movie. I just think that it was, for the most part, a slasher film that was trying to kind of be a little different by following two different stories and bringing them together into one. But it just didn't quite succeed. I think that there were just little bits that they missed that could have made it could have uplifted it a little bit.
It also did not feel like a movie that was made in 2014. It felt old. Like,
yeah,
watching, if you just flip it on, like, it does not look like a new movie. It doesn't look like nowadays technology. Like, you could probably go make a movie with an iPhone. I don't know if you have one, but you could make a movie with an iPhone and you could not tell the difference. Whereas 20, 30 years ago, you could tell the difference between a shitty camera and a really nice camera. And this feels like it was made with a shitty camera 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Which pisses me off. Like, I do not require polished media, but it's very easy to produce polished media for a very, very low cost these days. So why wouldn't you want to?
Well, if you watch the original, that was even shittier. And maybe that's part of it, is that it felt at times like a Dukes of Hazzard episode. In fact, they tried to do so much just dumb comedy in the original, and this is another parallel between the two. So in the new one, the deputy that is guarding the girl's house is the killer, is one of the killers. It is the main one. In the original movie, there's a deputy who is just basically comic relief throughout the whole thing. He's kind of the Smokey in Smokey and the Bandit. It's just everything that they do with him is just, he's stupid and he keeps failing. He crashes his car all the time. It's just, they try to interject this kind of slapstick humor into this movie where there are also very horrific death scenes. And it doesn't quite make, and they do the screwball music when he's on the screen. They have him yell at people over the phone for no reason. It's just really strange. But I wondered if that was if they were trying to subvert that by making the deputy the killer in this film, because he's kind of a nothing character for the most part, and then it gets revealed that he's the killer, and it's not a huge reveal. But if you're watching it, having watched the other one, maybe it would have been more surprising, or maybe it would have been like, oh, vindication for this guy who is just a screw up.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know how to justify the poor decisions that they made. I was trying to find a budget. There isn't really like clear monetary amounts listed anywhere for the budget they had for this movie, because I was like, maybe they had a really low budget, and that's why some of the stuff is just stupid. But I don't know. The movie's not even a year old.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not old at all, and I didn't hear of it until you brought it up.
Not even like nothing. Not even. Wow.
No clue. But again, they had some quality actors in it who, yes, occasionally have done shitty films, but it's not like they were putting in bad performances here. It was just they were in this movie, and this movie didn't meet their level of performance.
Yeah, they were given a poor script to work with, and it had absolutely nothing to do with them as actors or anything like that. So you can only do so much with what you're given, and if you're given shit, you're only able to produce a slightly better version of shit. So,
yeah, and I think that's what we got on this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it 2 out of 5 dead hookers. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that sounds probably close. The other thing about this is that the Sackhead murder character that they have in this looks very familiar to us now, but that again goes back to 1976 from the original film. That's the look that they had for that character, and that predates Jason in Friday the 13th. It's the same kind of look, but it was the first time that look was used. So that could be another reason why, as a horror fan, maybe the creators are like, oh, we want to redo this movie because it actually predates this other stuff that people are used to now. At the same time, though, it's like John Carter of Mars. You do a movie of that today, and nobody gives a crap about it because they've seen all these other things that have come out over the years that are the same kind of story, even though John Carter of Mars predated all those other things.
Yeah, you potentially shoot yourself in the foot unless you put out something like that is really gonna it's awe-inspiring to people that aren't familiar with it. That didn't happen. You know, it was like a bad reincarnation of the original Jason without a backstory. At least Jason had a backstory as to why he wanted to kill everybody. You never.
It wasn't just a big download in the middle of the movie. It was something that you kind of saw built up, especially over time with the various sequels.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's 9, 10 Jason movies.
Well, 10 was when they went to outer space, so there's actually been more than that if you consider the remakes and the.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the original, so it was 10. I always had a hard time remembering. This makes me a shitty Jason fan, but because they go out of order there. Like obviously, Jason X is in the future; it's very far in the future, but some of them in the middle get a little difficult. But we'll talk about that another time. Do you have any final thoughts on this movie?
It's just it was. I've seen some shitty stuff on Netflix as far as horror movies go. I wouldn't say this is the lowest of the low. It felt like it was actually a movie, which is better than some things. Which is we followed around with the carrying the camera, doing the found footage stuff. It wasn't anything like that, at least. So it at least it had some sort of mythology that it was trying to go off of and build, which I appreciate. It just, maybe the first try out, it wasn't the right way to go.
Right. Yeah, like I said, I really wish this movie would have gone a lot better, in my opinion, for a number of reasons, mostly a discussion, but it kind of fell short. So I do want to touch on something else, because today being August 31st, the day we're recording this, Until Dawn came out last Tuesday, the 25th. And this was something when we first, this podcast was a goal. I'm like, I want to finish this game right away so we can talk about it. And I know it's going to be a long conversation because you haven't had the pleasure of playing it yet.
No, but my wife now wants a PS4 strictly for that game.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. Like, I plan on going back, and I never replay games. Like, I play them and I'm done. I don't have an interest to, but now I want to go back and play this one a lot. It took me about a hair under 7 hours, which is kind of short, but the entire time, like, I wanted to keep playing. Like, I neglected things around my house to play this game, and it drove my wife nuts. But it has like a really cool story, and like the characters, you really like. It puts you in situations in which you decide, do I want to hurt this? Like, if I make this decision and this kills this person, like, I might kind of feel bad about it. Like, right away that you kind of get to know the characters, and a lot of them are dating or had dated, and there's a point where you're one of the girls and you see another girl and one of the guys who used to be dating. I don't want to start throwing out names, but you then are poised with the choice to show her current boyfriend that they're kind of, something's going on, or to stop it from him seeing it, to, so you don't want to piss him off. And it's like things like that then change the interactions between the characters further down the game story. And like, it'll tell you when you make a decision. It's very big on the butterfly effect. Like, every time something big happens, these butterflies will kind of fly out of the corner, and it'll say butterfly status updated. And it was just really cool to, like, a decision is made and something happens, and it's like, oh, I wonder what would have happened had I gone the other way. And I don't want to spoil it, but there's some big plot twists, and then the story kind of takes a 90-degree turn at a different angle a little later. But I think you should go buy your wife a PlayStation and this, and we can have a better talk about it. But if anyone listening to this is kind of on the fence, I say do it. I say do it. $60 is a lot for a game, so if 7 hours is not enough for you and you're not interested in doing any replays, rent it, Redbox it. It literally took me 2 nights, and that was 2 weeknights. So I worked until 5 o'clock both nights, and then came home and played it, and was still in bed at a respectable hour. Do it, yeah.
Yeah, Ryan Murphy, who hosts our Galactic Gaming News here on GN Casts, he was talking about it as well. He really liked it. He played the first few hours and I think recorded it, that he's going to be posting either on the new YouTube gaming channel or maybe on Twitch or something.
Nice.
So
yeah, him and I had like briefly, like 2 sentences worth, spoke about it. So I was curious. I know he said he's going to be doing an episode of his show on it, correct?
I think so.
Yeah. So we'll have to be sure that when that comes out, if you're still on the fence and Ryan puts that out, listen to it. Hopefully he will sway you if I did not, with my velvety baritone voice. That I think that wraps it up for this one, unless you want to sing a quick tune, do a nice 2-step.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
Yeah. I thank you. I enjoyed that. That made my night. I had a shitty day, so that's awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone listening. This has been another episode of Podcast of Terror. If you missed it, we watched The Town, The Dreaded Sundown, and it was mediocre at best. Go ahead and find us on Stitcher, iTunes. Subscribe to all the other Galactic Netcast shows, Weird World Weekly, Sci-Fi Geeks Club, Adventure Party. They're all out there, and they're all great. So once again, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you guys soon. See you later.
Bye.
All right, let me save this real quick and then start the next one. I think we're getting better at this.
It takes practice. You know, it's not going to be something we do right away.
Saving. Recording. All right. We didn't talk about the boobs. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That'll be a nice surprise for anybody who does decide to watch it. That's your reward.
Your reward are nipples, which are everywhere on the internet.
Yeah, but it was pretty good. I mean, it was quick, but well, it sucks. But it was like they didn't just tiptoe around it. It's like, here, these people are just gonna bang.
Dude, they really got into it. Like
yeah,
that was top-notch B horror movie banging.
And that girl showed up for no other reason than to bang and get her face just scraped off in the middle of a car. Just
see, this is damn it. Totally could have added that. Yeah, whatever. All right, let's start the next one. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. So I'm thinking sometime next week, early next week, we could do a news one.
Sure.
And after that, we'll start on our thing, our rotation. Unless you have any opposition.
Not at all.
I'm making you pick the next movie.
Okay.
So whatever you want to watch, it's up to you.
You know, I'm just going to set my wife on it. I'm just going.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I feel bad always being like, hey, let's watch this. Let's watch, because you're so receptive to that, and I want you to.
Oh no, I have no problem with it. It's nice because so far it almost seems like there's a theme.
Those are the style of movies I like. Like I like slasher movies and stuff like that. But that's why I want you to pick, so we get some variety.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna start the next one now. Hello, welcome to the Podcast of Terror. This is a production of Galactic Netcasts. This is the show where we talk about things that are scary, things that are terrifying, things that scared you. I'm your host, Matt Stein. With me again is Corey Scott, who's a silver fox, if I've ever seen one.
I am not colorful.
He's various shades of white, which, they're calming. They're calming shades of white. There's nothing wrong. How are you doing besides apparently white?
It's nice to have privilege. So
easy now. For those tuning in for the first time, As I mentioned, this is a production of Galactic Netcasts. You can find this show and all the other ones that we do at Galactic Netcasts by going to gncasts.com. You can also find our show on iTunes and Stitcher. If you like us, even if you hate us, 5-star reviews. Tell your family and your friends. You can tell your buddies at the bar, like, yeah, I hate these guys. Just listen to them act like assholes on the internet.
Stitcher's kind of a little different. It doesn't have a star rating. It has a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I think that's by the episode. So you can just, while you're listening to it, you can give a thumbs up.
See?
Or you can give a thumbs down. I'm not particular. Fuck you anyway.
I never knew that. I didn't know Stitcher was on the thumb system. Here, they were a star system, and this was America. I'm wrong.
Take that thumb, put it right up your ass.
After you remove that thumb from your ass, you can head on over, send us some feedback to galacticnetcasts@gmail.com. You can even tell us how much you hate us using your voice. Also at gncast.com, you put a microphone into your mouth and talk about how much you hate us. Then we'll get the message and we'll talk about it. I would gladly put someone on the air if they really wanted to put a microphone in the mouth to say they hated us. You can also get involved at the Galactic Collective. There's a link how to on the website as well at gncasts.com. Unless you're in Canada, then it's probably .ca. I'm just kidding. It's still .com.
It's still .com.
Yeah. This week we watched the movie Cropsey, which I didn't know was a documentary when I decided that we were going to watch this.
We were all completely clueless.
I was really hopeful. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 90%, and IMDb gave it a 6.4, which, I mean, it's not saying much when IMDb doesn't do very good. But a little backstory. The reason I picked this movie is because I heard about it at work, because I work with a guy whose last name is Cropsey, and we kept making jokes about how he was potentially a serial killer because he's really quiet. He's a super nice guy, but he's just really quiet. He's also like a 5th degree black belt or something insane.
That's the perfect guy to make fun of.
Oh, absolutely. Him and I are on the same page. We've traveled a few times together for work, and I'm still here. And he hasn't gotten me arrested. So thumbs up to that guy. But yeah, like I said, I did not realize this was a documentary. I thought it was about a serial killer whose name was Cropsey, who kills a bunch of people. But it turns out that it is a documentary based on an urban legend of Staten Island.
Yeah, it's Staten Island, but it's also all the New York area. It's kind of one of those things that it's what kids get told around the campfire when they're out in like their Boy Scout troop campovers. It's one of those things that, at least where it starts out, they're telling you about what is an urban legend kind of character that has the hook on the hand or comes and brings an axe and chops up little kids. But it strays away from that very quickly. It goes into someone that they kind of, it changed their childhood from being, oh, this is just something that you tell kids, but it's not really true, to here's something that has such a degree of truth that it may be where some of these stories came from. And it was the story of Andre Rand, who was a convicted child kidnapper from Staten Island.
Which, going back a little bit when they were talking about, like, oh, he's got a hook in a hand, and it was like various locals recounted what they were told as kids as to what the boogeyman is. And I thought that was kind of cool because they make a mention of, like, everyone's town has that location where unspeakable things happen. And the first thing I thought of was, I'm from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which is a small city between Milwaukee and Green Bay right on the lake. And growing up, we had the Spanish House. And it was this empty Spanish-style house that apparently a World War II German mad scientist lived in, and he did all these crazy experiments on people. And like all this weird shit happened, and if you got into the house, there was a security system and there was a phone, and it would ring, and if you picked it up, the cops would show up. And it's like that made it a little, I don't want to say it made it more believable because this really happened, but it made it hit home a little more because it makes you recount your childhood and what scared the shit out of you in your neighborhood when you were a kid, and that house that you never wanted to go to and that place you never wanted to be involved in. And I think that's what really made this a cool documentary, because makes you think like, what if I was in Staten Island and what if this happened to me? And um, but yeah, like you said, it turns into where they kind of talk about this Rand guy who and I don't know since this came out if they ever like actually convicted him or found the rest of the bodies, but all this evidence points towards him, and he doesn't like handicapped kids, and he thinks that they shouldn't be around, and that's kind of what you get in the end. But it was like just all of this information about him was crazy, where it's like this girl disappeared, and Rand was the maintenance guy, and he would stand by this window and watch them.
Yeah, he worked at what was essentially an asylum for children, which there's two giant asylums that were in Staten Island at that time. One was for adults, one was for essentially kids, and it wasn't even like they were kids that had mental issues. You would send kids with Down syndrome there. You would send kids who had physical imperfections there that basically doctors used to tell parents, you know, your child's never going to be normal. Send them to this institution. They'll be taken care of. And it was kind of a way to wash your hands of having to take care of this child that was always going to be a special needs case. In those days, it was not unusual for people just want to go without taking care of that child at that point, other than be ostracized or have to kind of care for somebody for the rest of their life.
Which is insane that that's just something that was okay. Just be like, this kid's going to be a little more work than a normal one. Let's just ship him off.
Yeah, and you see in this, they show as part of the documentary some footage from Geraldo Rivera going into the hospital when it was still running years prior, and the kids there and the state that they're in. And then you see Andre Rand and some of the people who work there, and I think that he even mentions this, is that they're really not in any better shape than the children.
Right.
You know, they're kind of, it's the inmates running the asylum is essentially what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I'd like to sidebar a little bit real quick. We really have to slow clap Geraldo's mustache in the expose. Like, this is prime Geraldo with a big, thick nose neighbor.
Yeah, it made my thighs twitch just looking at him.
My God, he looked just hunky as hell. His hair was all flowy, and man, that mustache was just, it was Broom-esque.
It was.
Oh, yeah.
Wilford Brimley's looking at that like, you got any oatmeal in there? Because I want to suckle on it.
Yeah, I'm a little hungry. just some diabetes. Anyway, we digress. We do that a lot here. Get used to it.
A little bit.
There was another kind of twist to the story, was like the whole satanic cult aspect of everything, which I didn't see it coming.
Right.
And it wasn't just like, oh yeah, there's some satanic cults and some weird shit happens. It was like they were watching the expose with Rand, and they're like, oh, his eyes rolled back in his head. He started foaming at the mouth, and I'm like, because they briefly talked about how they thought he was possessed, and that's probably how all these kids went missing, because he would kidnap the kids, and then at one point they're like, yeah, he maybe sold them to a cult.
Right, like, because when they first arrest him, you know, they searched all the grounds of where he was living. He didn't have a home. He was living outdoors on the grounds for Willowbrook, the ex-asylum, and they didn't find anything. And then a few days later, all of a sudden, they do find the body of the missing girl, but it seemed like she had been buried there after the fact, and it was obviously not where she was killed, because the way that her blood pooled, she was buried upside down, but her blood had pooled at her feet.
Mm-hmm.
So there was just a lot of things that didn't add up, and they wondered if he had accomplices, if he was being set up. They go through so many different theories as to what could be happening and why, whether it was Rand, whether it wasn't Rand, whether he worked with other people, whether he was a Satanist. They show the tunnels and stuff that he used to go in through in Willowbrook. And then it turns out that his mother was at the other asylum, which was the same exact type of building and had the same tunnel structure and things there. So he may have learned about all of this stuff as a child visiting her there, and then transferred over to this place as an adult, as an employee, and utilize that knowledge to get around and to do the things that he was doing to, I mean, basically kidnap and kill children.
which is crazy. Like, I don't know. It's just such like an out there idea or an out there concept. And the thing that they also mentioned that like this happened around the same time as the Son of Sam out there
Right.
in that area too. And also there was a lot of Satanist undertones, tie-ins, whatever you want to look at it. So why? Because I honestly had never heard about this until I watched this.
Yeah, I mean, we like you were saying, every town has their kind of, urban legend thing that they have. We had something in Michigan that I grew up with, the Pink Castle, which was this big, giant, kind of stoned off building that was where a bunch of witch covens were supposed to practice. And so it was people would drive by there, and then you would get shot at by some guy with rock salt in in a rifle,
Did
or
you
not a rifle, in a shotgun.
did you go? Did this
Oh, of
happen?
course, yeah, absolutely.
You got shot at with rock salt?
I've been hit with rock salt before. Yeah, good times as a kid. We everything crazy. We also had a lady that used to, like, somehow remember this phone number got passed around at my high school, and everyone's like, you got to call and talk to Donna, the psychic dog lady. And all these people were calling this number and talking to this woman, Donna, and Donna would describe what you looked like, describe what you were wearing, and she would know. And then she would bark like a dog, and she's a little bit off. So my friends and I got the number, and one of my friends, Chris, got kind of obsessed and kept calling Donna and kept calling and calling. And then he found out that she had an in-home caregiver, and he started talking to her. So we wound up looking and in the phone book finding the number, like after searching for a long time, finding the number to reverse out and get the address for her. And we went to her apartment.
What?
And yeah, we met the woman Donna that everybody at my school was talking about and was kind of like obsessed over. And Chris actually wound up dating her caregiver for a while, which was even weirder.
What?
Yeah. So like we chased these things down where I grew up because it's Michigan. There wasn't a lot to do. But that was the kind of thing. So Satanism and all this stuff that they're talking about in this, I can understand. I remember in the 80s, like how big that stuff was, how obsessed we were that, there was a God, but there was a devil, and the devil caused people to do horrible things. And like just the belief system was so strong. It seems like it was even more so maybe in the Staten Island area, because they go and they talk to a woman who runs essentially a street church that says that she knows of Satanists and that they've been trying to kill her and kill different members of her church because she talks about them. It's really weird.
That's fucked.
Yeah.
I never had anything that awesome when I was young. I just didn't know about it. We used to try and find the Satanic Church in Sheboygan, and we thought the Masonic Temple was a Satanic Church because we're dumb. But that was like a pretty intimidating, big ass stone building, so it could have. And then we found out the Satanic Church was like some house on the lakefront that no one, you had to, whatever, you had to call someone to get the address, and it was, whatever.
Yeah. Well, we had, I went to a couple of conventions that had psychics and witches and Wiccans back before anybody knew what a Wiccan was. And they weren't just women who weren't very svelte. I used to go to all these things. My mom was pretty cool and encouraging about letting me do that stuff. So I practiced witchcraft for a while when I was like in my young teens. And then I kind of wound up meeting up with other people who did that kind of stuff, and it just branched out.
Huh. I grew up strict Catholic.
Yeah, I went to Catholic school.
So did I.
Right.
Yeah.
Some rebel in their own ways.
Yeah, I did drugs. You practice witchcraft. It happens. Hey,
I couldn't afford the drugs.
Oh, neither could I. We digressed again.
But we both used incense, so that was probably.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think so. It was mostly a lot of dryer sheet over a paper towel too.
Oh, there you go.
We were poor kids. Back to the movie, which is why we're actually here. Um, Something that kind of was strange to me is how they got the name Cropsey. Now, and they referred to a Cropsey as like what they called the idea of a boogeyman. So instead of saying like, "Oh, it's the boogeyman," they would just say like, "Oh, that's Cropsey."
Yeah, and I've seen some people, actually a lot of people at IMDb are very pissed off that they stole Cropsey from New York and made it a Staten Island thing in the film, and I'm like, well, that's not really what they did. They're talking about as kids in Staten Island, they grew up hearing these same stories. It makes sense. It's going to branch out a little bit from where you're at. But there's a street in New York named Cropsey, but it's named after somebody I think from Staten Island. So I'm not sure exactly how that becomes the calling name for this person.
Yeah, it's not like a comment. Sorry, I'm trying to type at the same time to see if I can figure out why they called it Cropsey. It's not like a common word. It's not a common. I'm trying to like think as I talk, and I'm not doing very good at it. But like, how do you get from boogeyman to Cropsey as being that?
Yeah,
You know,
I thought it was going to be. I thought when I was watching this movie, it was going to be something like Signs, and there was going to be some guy out in the fields who was causing crop circles. I did not know what to expect from this.
I knew going into it that it was about a serial killer per se, but I thought it was a serial killer named Cropsey, and that's about it. But like I said, it turns out that they just call Cropsey like any sort of boogeyman. So any of the
Yeah, I mean, it's as opposed to calling it's like the Slender Man, it's like Candyman, it's like
they're all
Bloody Mary, all of those things that when we were kids, Bloody Mary was the one that I remember from being a kid. There was a boogeyman, but you never really. It seemed kind of fake. But Bloody Mary, you believed in. Bloody Mary, you would not go into the bathroom at school, turn out the lights, and spin around and say her name 3 times. You just wouldn't.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I would never do it as a kid, and I did a lot of dumb stuff. And like I'm looking, I don't have blinds on my windows right now, and I keep looking out them because I'm starting to freak out.
Well, you do have a camera on you, so that could be Slenderman.
I don't watch the camera, and fuck you, man. It's just not cool. You totally derailed my train of thought because now I'm waiting for something to come up behind me. Yeah. And everything I'm googling shows Cropsey in reference to the movie or the killer of Staten Island. I don't know. That's kind of a bummer that there isn't a better explanation as to why they used the word Cropsey, or how it's.
See, that's the thing, is that this doesn't really explore the Cropsey myth, assumed myth. It explores the story of someone else who's a killer that reminded them of Cropsey, and may have in some ways been. It asks the question sort of, which is, do stories create the monster, or does the monster create the story?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the same. The chicken or the egg come first,
right?
That it's completely up to the eye of the beholder, basically. But now on the Cropsey Wikipedia page, it basically admits that it starts out as the Cropsey, a boogeyman-like character from New York, urban legend, and then it segues into the story of Andre Rand, and so it kind of leaves the concept of why they named the movie completely behind and goes to a different story, which now reading that, like, kind of pisses me off, because it's like you sucked me in with this concept of a urban legend in that area, and then kind of went to your own devices and started talking about this guy who killed a bunch of kids.
Yeah, that's exactly what it does. And that was the thing for me too, is that I felt like, okay, you're getting me in with this, but it has nothing to do with this at all. And you just wanted to tell this other story, but this was the framing. It would be, I would be more pissed off if it wasn't a pretty good documentary. I think that what the story that it told about Rand and the stuff that he did and the questions that leaves up in the air, because it really doesn't get to prove anything. He was found guilty of kidnapping, but not murder in the case of the first one. And then they, right about the time that he's about to be up for parole, they try him for one of the other kids that's been missing. And
Yeah,
that whole case doesn't even seem like it seems suspect. It seems like the evidence shouldn't have really convicted him, but people just really wanted to.
yeah, and there was a very brief portion which I thought was cool, where they talked to people who are kind of like, you know what, maybe he didn't do it. Like, it doesn't make sense. There's this person makes more sense for these reasons, and it kind of gave a second look and more rounded approach to the concept of the story versus just saying like, this guy is the killer and he's the kidnapper and these are the reasons why, and they just drill it home that he did it. This at least leaves it presents more information to allow the viewer to kind of make their own assumption. Yes, there's far more pointing to the fact that he did it, but there's also no smoking gun in this story that they found him with a kid or they found him burying the kid's body or anything.
Right.
Nothing,
Nothing,
he was
nothing
there.
as far as evidence to link him at all. And his lawyers make a pretty good point about that. They're like, this was obvious that they wanted him to be guilty. They just didn't find a way to make that actually happen, but they didn't care.
He kind of becomes he's portrayed as a scapegoat, and when you look at it that way, this reminds me of like the West Memphis 3 case. Like, now this is kind of a different. It's kind of different, but it's kind of the same, where they took someone who they could put into the shoes of being the suspect or the killer, and just kind of really drove it home because it made the most sense to them, regardless of if it was true or not. And I don't know if you're familiar with the West Memphis 3. If you're not, I'm going to be kind of sad.
Not hugely, no.
Okay, well, for you and anyone else not familiar, quick rundown. There were some murders in West Memphis in the 80s, and in a really small town. They couldn't figure out who did it, so they essentially framed these 3 kids, and these 3 kids had long hair, listened to Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer, and it became this heavy metal made him kill my children kind of thing. And it was like 2 years ago they were released, but they were released by having to admit guilt.
Right.
So at that point, I think they were kind of like, fuck it, let's get out. But they had Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, Marilyn Manson, Ozzy Osbourne, Johnny Depp. Like, they would have huge concerts in benefit to these kids because it was like such a huge, it was a weird thing. And I, having listened to heavy metal my entire life, like, I was never alienated to that point, but I was always kind of, the one on the outside because I was the weird kid. I would always wear black shirts. I'd always listen to weird music. So it kind of hit home, but not like as bad as some people did. But anyways, the digression is just horrible, and I think I made up a word right now.
20 years ago, me and my best friend from Michigan living out here in California, both of us wore trench coats, and all of a sudden the trench coat mafia happens in Michigan, and we're the ones getting singled out in our neighborhoods. Like, no, I like to keep the wind off me.
Yeah, I remember being in middle school and like wearing pants, and I would put my pant leg over the tongue of my shoe, and someone asked me if I was in a gang.
Right.
I'm like, no, it just looks ridiculous to have your tongue sticking out of your pants.
Yeah.
Like, not everything has some bad connotation to it. Like, I went to a Lutheran high school as well. I played in band, so we would play for basketball games. I was told by the administration at my high school that I could not wear like metal t-shirts because it made the school look bad. And I'm like, all right, man. Like, since then, like, there guys have been in my class who've, gotten arrested and did all this crazy shit. Yet I'm the bad one because I listen to Slayer and go to Slayer and Slipknot concerts, and it's fucked.
And that's the thing this movie kind of plays that, is that there's a level where people just feel like they're uncomfortable, and it doesn't matter who you are or what kind of person you are. You're outside of their comfort zone, or they want something to point at and say, this is why things went wrong. And you get scapegoated. So, right, you wear metal shirts. Well, metal is obviously evil and bad because I don't listen to metal, and I've never had any kind of experience before where, this kind of shit happens. So I'm going to blame the guy in the metal shirt, or I'm going to blame the kids who listen to metal music because they're different from us. And that's what this movie does express. It doesn't say Andre Rand isn't guilty. It never says that. it says that the evidence against him seemed pretty weak for them to convict him on that second crime. Whether he did it or not, nobody winds up with an actual clue as to what really happened at the end of this. But it seems kind of obvious that we need to jail our boogeyman to feel safe. Whether we are or not, we have to at least keep people feeling like we did what we could to keep them safe.
Right, but and it also plays off of like the people are different. So it says Andre Rand chose to kill, developmentally challenged children because they were different in essence. They shouldn't live because they're different. But when you look at it from the standpoint of like he too was different, he was probably a deck or two, card or two short of a deck. That's like evil killing evil. That's like a metal kid killing a metal. People don't care about it, but it was children. I don't know. I don't want to go down that path because it doesn't really make sense anymore. But it's kind of the same. It's just the other way around. It's like the normal person killing the kid who sticks out.
Yeah, and I mean he's pretty good at being manipulative. He kind of starts manipulating the people who are doing the documentary by sending them letters and saying, oh yeah, I'll do this and don't say these things, and I don't want you showing up here, but show up at this time at this date. And then all of a sudden he's like, no, I don't want to see you, and he's done that to other people before them. He kind of is playing things the way that he wants them played, for as far as the fact that he's in jail for the rest of his life. So I don't think of him as an innocent, but that's the whole thing, is that it's just, it seems cut and dry in a way that it can't be cut and dry.
Yeah.
And it seems like they picked a bad guy, but was he the right bad guy? Or was he the only bad guy? And that's the hardest part, is that, but I guess if kids didn't keep disappearing, they must have done something right.
As far as kids don't keep disappearing.
Right. Well, those same kids.
Yeah. But there's also not the shit. I can't think of the word. What the hell? Where were they? What the hell were they in? The hospital.
That institution. Yeah.
Yeah, the institution. It doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So it could have had something to do with that too. I mean,
the other thing is that I don't think they went into it at all, is that we don't know, as far as records from the kids that were in that institution, if any of them were also killed. They kind of go into how many people were being kidnapped and taken away, and were these Satanists doing this, but who was keeping track of the kids in that institution? And when it finally got closed down, did anybody kind of follow up and see if any of them were gone too, or did anybody care?
That's a valid point. Did anyone care that they were missing?
Right.
They don't talk about that, but they show a lot of headlines of like kids missing and this and that and the other thing, but they really only focus on one main kid having gone missing.
They focus on the main girl at first, and then they go into the other kids. Another little girl that was missing, that went to buy the bar of soap at the corner store, and which they then realized probably wasn't her years later. And then the older boy who looked like Mick Jagger,
that
was 21, that had the IQ of a 15-year-old. I don't even know what that means. And he was at when they were looking for the second little girl, he was in front of the camera at one point, and the fact that he gets tied into it and disappears as well. So they do show other kids as the case is gone, and one of the other kids is the one that he gets the second case against him, so he winds up being in jail for another 30 years.
Yeah, which just seems weird. Like you said, it almost seems like they pointed all the evidence at him in an effort to keep him in prison without even kind of looking too hard for who may have actually done it.
Yeah. And I tried to look for follow-ups because this movie's from 2009. I tried to look for more information on it past that. I didn't really see a lot. So I wonder if they just never found out anymore, if people just stopped caring. Once the movie came out, they were done.
It's very possible that people just stopped caring. That is definitely something that's possible. Like they probably were super gung-ho about it, and then the evidence kind of came out, the guy was put away, and everyone just stopped caring because they're like, we don't have to put it anymore, it's done, it's over with.
We got our footage.
Yeah, I'm sure the parents of the children whose bodies were never found still cared, but the general public probably was like, that fuck it, we're good. They just leave well enough alone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it shit 4 out of 5 dead hookers.
Yeah, I'd say 3.5 to 4. The only problems I have with it really are the fact that it kind of leads you in with false information of what it's going to be about, and then once you're already watching it, it goes, okay, I told you that story, sort of, not really, to tell you this story, which is
Yeah, it did a really good job of presenting the facts and kind of outlining the background story to it for someone that has never ever heard about the Staten Island children murders. So I have to applaud him for that, because that's a lot of times you'll see a documentary and it just like it just balls deep right away, and you're just in the thick of the story and you never really segue into what's going on for someone who's never heard about it.
Although there was that scene where they go to one of the places at night and they don't want to go in, or the girl doesn't want to go in. And the guy's like, oh yeah, we're going in. And then it felt a little Blair Witchy at that point. It felt like they were trying to give you that feeling of watching the Blair Witch, of them being in the dark and having the cameras only as their light. And then things like noises start happening and they're being chased around. They hear people coming up, and then turn out to be just a bunch of high school kids who were, following their own urban legend stuff.
Yeah, which, I mean, it seems kind of cool, because then it just all circles back to like the shit that you hear when you're a kid that is meant to scare the hell out of you, and you investigate it because what else are you going to do when you're a teenager? Although in Staten Island, I feel like there's more to do than, say, Michigan or Wisconsin.
Yeah, but when you're a teenager, probably not as much as you would think.
Yeah,
like these days especially, there's not shit for kids to do. But I think it's interesting that 25, 30 years later, that horror story from the 70s is still a horror story to these kids today.
Yeah, that which is cool. I mean, I would be curious to go back to my hometown and, God forbid, talk to a teenager and try and see what's scary shit of them these days. But like that concept to see like what are kids hearing these days, is what scares them, what keeps them up at night, keeps them awake.
My iPad.
Usually my dog kicking me.
Right.
Sometimes my wife snores. These are the problems of being an adult. I guess so. If someone who's listening has a teenager and would like to share the story of their area, their scary area, I think that'd be kind of cool.
Just be careful about saying we want you to send us stories about your kids' areas. Just tell us about the urban legends you grew up with. Tell us about the urban legends that might still be going around your town. If you're younger, or if you know younger people, ask them, what are the horror stories that you've heard? Like, what is the thing that you've been told never to go towards?
Yeah,
if you're an adult, what were the things that you were afraid of, and did you ever explore it? Did you ever try to find out more about it?
Yeah, I'm really glad you cleared that up. A lot of times I think before I speak before I think. See, did it again right there. And then I talk about areas. But yeah, I'd be curious. Just different. I feel like urban legends kind of are all rooted in the same thing. There's a place, there's a person, and there's some sort of fucked up story. But
they're all warnings. They're like, be good or bad things will happen to you. It's the same thing as having a devil. It's like, you have to do what we tell you to do, or this scary thing is going to come and get you, and it's going to hurt you, or it's going to hurt your family, or it's going to tell people your secrets. That's what it's always about. It's a warning to not put your hand in the fire.
Mm-hmm. But which is it's like an aid in adolescence. You know what I mean? Yeah. Your parents can't teach you everything, so there has to be some sort of outside intervention, and I think that's what urban legends are for, and it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, most horror movies are basically around, don't do these things to protect yourself. If you have sex, you're going to be murdered. If you party and have too good of a time, you're going to be murdered. It's every one of them is meant to prey on the fear of, you need to be a better person. If you're not a good person, then you're just as likely as anybody else to be butchered in the woods.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. Final thoughts, buddy?
I think it was kind of cool to have it be a documentary after the couple horror movies that we've done so far. I think it was a nice change up but it still kind of feels like we're on that road of slashers slash urban legend kind of things, from Slenderman being more of a mysterious character to what we had with our second movie, the town that
Dreaded Sundown.
Dreaded Sundown, which could have gone either way. It turned out to be more of a slasher film, but it was still that be afraid of this character in the dark. This was be afraid of a character in the dark that's actually real, and that was
Yes.
kind of neat.
Yeah, and it had that cool twist to it, which, like you said, every urban legend is a warning, and this just ended up being a real thing. So yeah, it's a good movie. I say go watch it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth seeing.
Yeah. Thanks again for listening. Please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, you thumb up. iTunes, you give it a 5 stars. Go to the website, gncasts.com. Love everything that we do over there. Give a lot of good reviews because we spend a lot of time on this stuff. I never really knew until I produced my own how much work this shit can really be. So it is no joke, and we do it because we love sharing stuff with you guys. So thank you again for your time, and until next time, you keep that shit scary, guys. So yeah.
Bye, everybody.
I had to wait for you to say bye. Let me